Hello everyone, this is Elias Martin from Collecting Japanese Prints. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together and we discuss Japanese prints, art, history, culture. I'd like to thank all of you for joining me. This is the first Woodblock Wednesday after my trip to Japan. I wanted to do one last week while I was in Japan, but I couldn't get everything organized and have artwork to show that Wednesday. Plus, I had a really busy schedule. So I'm back fighting some jet lag and a cold, but very happy to be back. The trip was fantastic. For all of you who've been to Japan, you know how wonderful Japan can be. And for those of you who haven't been to Japan, I highly recommend paying a visit to Japan. Of course, in winter, it's a different experience, and I have to say, I still recommend it because partly for the food. A lot of the fish that I love is in season in Japan in the winter, and so. Well, you get really great seafood, great sushi, the tuna that is extremely rich and fatty but delicious is fantastic in January. So one other reason to go. But before we discuss the artwork that I set aside today, I wanted to point out a few things that I found kind of interesting for you. For those of you that are interested in the Japanese art market, particularly as it relates to prints. When I go to Japan, I attend dealers' auctions, as well as visiting collectors and sellers, private sellers. And the auctions that I attended are often a good gauge where the market is. And, so I attended a couple auctions, and I have to say that the market for Japanese prints is very strong. It's hot, and really great material. Really great material that is by well-known artists or top designs. Even top designs by lesser artists that are not as well known are commanding very strong prices at auction and even at private galleries. So the market is very, very strong. I will say that when I was in Japan, one of the reasons why I think the market is so strong is there's a scarcity of material. You just don't see amazing prints come up for sale in Japan, at least not in the last few times I was there. Of course, there's some exceptions. You can find a few things, and I'm really good at finding things privately. I have a lot of connections with private collectors in Japan who reach out to me. And so, of course, if you're interested in selling your Japanese prints, feel free to reach out. But I guess what I want to say is that right now the market is very, very strong, but it's incredibly hard to find great material, which contributes to the strong prices you see in Japan. And that translates to a very strong and robust market in the US. A lot of the prints that you see in all of the Japanese print galleries in the US or out in the West, in Europe or here, are basically, their sourcing is Japan. Or, of course, locally, but the Japanese prices that are being reached at auction are indicative of the market all over the world. And so higher prices in Japan mean higher prices everywhere. And so I just wanted to point out for those of you who are interested in the market that's where we're at right now at the beginning of 2020. So without further ado, I want to discuss one particular print that I picked up in my last trip to Japan, and I'd like to do a comparison to something closely related, but not exactly related. But I like doing those kind of things. So anyway, so without further ado, let's look at the table and have a look. So the work that I'd like to show you today is a work by Takahisa Yumeiji. And Yumeiji was an artist that typically, people call him a Shinhanga artist, and I would agree with that. He was a Shinhanga artist in the sense that for most of his life, he produced prints for a publisher, and and there was woodblock carvers and printers that produced the artwork itself. But he's an interesting character because he was one of the first Japanese print artists to open up his own shop. And in 1914 through about 1916, he started a shop, Minatoya. And in this sort of shop, I hesitate to call it just a gallery because they sold all kinds of things. They sold scarves. I think they also sold textiles like kimonos and other things like that. And of course, stationery with designs by this artist, but also his prints. And so he designed prints of his own designs, and they were, of course, printed by artisans. He didn't actually carve and print his own work, by and large. There are a few pieces that exist that he self-carved and self-printed, and maybe I'll show you a couple of those things in the future. But for today's purposes, we're looking at a work that he designed. It's a poster, actually, from 1931. He passed away in 34. So this is a kind of a late work for him in his career. And, so it's an exhibition poster, and it's basically promoting an exhibition of his artwork. And it's not, the year is not given, but the date, this is March the 25th through the 29th, which is kind of funny. That's a very short lived exhibition, but it's kind of funny because I always think these Japanese exhibitions are so short. Even now, you go to Japan and you see an exhibition and it's up for like a month and a half, and that's it. So, so in traditional Japanese fashion, this was up for a very short period of time. But the poster does a really great job memorializing the exhibition because the poster is exquisite. The design itself is really strong. It's a nude, obviously, and she's sort of reclining on something, but this is in a very Yumeiji-esque fashion. She has this elongated body, and that was kind of his style. A lot of his a lot of the women, or even his people, his figures, men and women, are elongated, and she's sort of looking out wistfully at the viewer, and it's kind of interesting too. The face, the way he's done it. There's also this wonderful sort of play, a visual play where you could almost see the face changing, looking to the left. If you look at it that way. If I put my hand right there, and then if you look at it in this direction, she's looking right at you. So it's really interesting. In the calligraphy that he used to sort of promote the exhibition is really quite nice too. I mean, the composition, the calligraphy, the fonts, all of it works really, really well. And as things go, this print is actually quite large for an exhibition poster of this time. Usually you would see the posters 3/4 of this size, but this is quite large. And I'll compare this to a couple prints that are roughly Oban size, and you'll see how big it is. But again, from 1931, it depicts a woman, a moga, a modern woman. You'll notice her short hair there that is done in a very Yumeiji-esque fashion. But it's very short and very modern. She's very decisively modern. You could just see her with that short hair and not necessarily even caring that she's a nude. She's just reclining there, looking away, caught in a moment of emotion and thoughts. And, I think it's interesting to compare this print, which I just acquired. It's a wonderful work that you'll see soon on my website, to a couple of other prints by a Sosakuhanga artist. For those of you who know that I'm a big fan of Koshiro Onchi. And Onchi is arguably the most important 20th century printmaker, certainly in the Sosakuhanga genre, but I would make the argument in any genre. And I have here a comparison of two of his prints of a nude from 1929. And they're two of the same design, but they're printed very differently. So I'll start with the one at the bottom. And this particular print comes from a private collection. So it's very different from the other. And we'll start with me zooming in. You could see that on this particular print, the way that the skin is rendered, there's this really interesting purple, almost green, but certainly purple around the contours of the beauty's body and even around the face. And that has almost like an Egon Shelley kind of quality. It's very modern looking. It's actually, at the time, it was very stark and very controversial. This is not exactly how you would depict a nude in Japan. And nudes like this were, at this period of time, pretty controversial already. You know, she's usually depicted nudes in an area where you would expect to find a nude. So in the morning, showing a woman getting ready or coming out of the bath, that was acceptable. But in this particular case, she's reclining on this white sort of background that looks like sheets, and she's not really getting ready. She's just reclining, not a care in the world that she's nude. And so because of that, that was a bit controversial. And the beauty of this print, at least in this particular impression, is the contrast between the beautiful folds in the white cloth behind, and this print is titled White Cloth, set against the beautiful printing of the skin, which is almost lifelike, but also in a very accentuated way. In the background, there's this beautiful mica that's been applied, so that's quite nice. And so in comparison, there's this print that I have on my website for sale, and this particular impression is a unique impression. Yeah, and you know, I should be careful when I say unique, because Onchi's prints are printed so differently from one impression to another that one can make the argument that they're all unique in their own way. And I certainly understand that argument. But in this case, it's one could really say it's unique because there's a change in the state of the way that it's printed. There's a new block that's been added. And so in this particular case, the nude here has pubic hair, and so that is very different from this nude, which lacks it. And this is the regular version, the version you would see. This particular print is in museums and other private collections, and this is the version that you've seen in those collections. But this version being unique, it's interesting, Onchi was experimenting in how to present his nude, and he almost takes it a step further. I can't recall any other work in Japanese prints, particularly of this period, that depict pubic hair. So it was certainly controversial. It was against the grain, and I'm not surprised Onchi produced this work, because it suits his demeanor and his character. So I want to zoom in and I could show you the difference in how it's printed. You still see that little elements of purple and pink, but it's not as strong. It's not as strongly printed as the work below. And also the skin's a bit whiter, and he added a powder around the face, suggesting, she's almost ready to either get dressed and go about her day, or she just came back from being out and still has her makeup, her powder on. So it's really interesting to show this contrast with this woman who does not have that white makeup. I will also zoom in on the back. There is silver mica on the back of this print as well. I mean, in the background. And it's a different kind of mica. This one, you kind of see the speckles. And this one, there's more of a thicker silver consistency in the background. And then back here, you see this embossed K. Onchi signature, as you do here. So at the end, I'll zoom in on each work so you could see them closely. But what I want to, draw your attention to right now is this really interesting comparison between this Yumeiji work and these two Onchi prints. This Onchi print, as I mentioned, was done in 1929 for an exhibition. And there are other impressions that were done in 1930 through 1933. And they're various states, very different printings. But the original printing was done in 1929. And in this case, this print, I think, is inspired by Onchi's nude. This nude, the figure has a really strong resemblance. You could see, though her face is very Yumeiji-like, that same haircut, that same sort of look, you could see that in Onchi's print. I mean, I see a connection. Now, whether Yumeiji was focused on sort of reworking Onchi's design, I can't say. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I strongly suspect he wasn't. But at the same time, Yumeiji was certainly aware of Onchi's work. And there is a wonderful conversation occurring between this print and this design and these two prints. So, I think that's really interesting. And one comment I want to make about Yumeiji and Onchi is that Yumeiji actually gave Onchi his start. It was about 1914 that Yumeiji met Onchi. Onchi was in art school, and he met him and encouraged him to produce artwork, and he helped publish. He introduced him to the publisher that would, in the end, publish Onchi's poetry journal, Sukuhai, which contained prints. And in that same poetry journal, the very first work of abstraction was included, and that was in 1914. So it was an extremely important venture for Onchi. And Onchi would never have gotten his start in terms of making those prints for that particular magazine if it wasn't for Yumeiji. And I have this Yumeiji exhibition catalog from, I think it's like 2001, and it's a great catalog. I highly recommend it. I mean, you could probably pick it up somewhere. I'll probably have it in my book. Meeting Yumeiji and then going on and to succeed in making prints. Now in this case, that influence has been swapped. It's kind of interesting. So Yumeiji here in his poster, which is extraordinary, was working with a figure that of course is very Yumeiji-esque. I mean, it's all his own, but it has a very strong connection, I think, to Onchi's design that came earlier. So, that's just my insight on these two designs. And so now I'll zoom in so you could look at both designs more closely. The last thing I'll say about it is, if looking at my table here, the poster is twice the size of two Oban sheets. In fact, it's more than that. So I just wanted to show how large the poster is. And it's a very different kind of Shinhanga work. Most works of Shinhanga, or especially of this period, are Oban in size. And so when you're talking about even Yumeiji's work, by and large, it's Oban in size or even smaller. And this is a very large scale work for Yumeiji. In fact, I can't think of another design that is larger than this. This is probably as large as they got. And so it's a really interesting work that it's fantastic. I've actually never seen this print in person for sale. So I was very fortunate to acquire it on this last trip to Japan. It came privately, so all of you will see it on my website, collectingjapaneseprints.com, in the not too distant future. So again, I'm just showing the comparison of these two onchis with this Yumeiji. So I want to thank all of you for joining me on Woodblock Wednesday. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions as to any prints any questions about the prints you just saw, or anything on my website, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm happy to answer questions, and also your questions help me in the sense that they direct me on future videos on particular topics that might be important to you. So feel free to comment on the video, suggest topics you might want to see in future Woodblock Wednesdays. And again, thank you very much for joining me. I will see you next time.